AI, basic income, unemployment, things of that dynamic, universal basic income oftentimes relies upon a central actor in order to distribute out value, and that's like extreme centralization under a certain structure. Perhaps this notion of universal basic asset ownership is a viable strategy because this is an explicitly self-interested strategy. This strategy is such that by distributing out value to open source developers and ultimately the wider humanity, there's an opportunity to structure it such that I derive more money, I make more value, the more I give away. And that's why it's fundamentally similar to capitalism. But it's around the nature of ownership and around unconditional gifting. And this is the philosophy that I think the blockchain space is figuring out right now, and is really what it's about, I think. And I think, where are we headed, right? I think if people are running live experiments, like I'm participating in live experiments on this, around, distribution to hundreds of thousands of open source developers and ultimately humanity, what do we need to get this done? And, the most complex part is how do you distribute out value to wider humanity? And, maybe you might need some NGO that gets a list of anonymous, 7 billion public keys, and that's going to be really hard, and it's up to the community to agree on that. They might even have to do stuff like, fingerprint, vein print, and that's it, like no names or nothing like that. But if you really want to do this in a scalable, sustainable way, it's probably going to require something called peer-to-peer oracles. Peer-to-peer oracles are basically one of the largest unsolved problem in the cryptocurrency space right now. I think it could end up being key to decentralization. Peer-to-peer oracles essentially is, in a decentralized way, you verify some action in the real world. And there's been papers written about peer-to-peer oracles whereby it involves, people showing up in a room and doing a key exchange and verification. You have a key signing party effectively, and then you publish that, and then you assign randomness to the people you're supposed to talk to. And that's supposed to be done globally or something like that. And that's like, it's a hard problem to solve, and it's basically an unsolved problem right now. But essentially what you want is a list of people to be distributing value to, or maybe more accurately, a list of keys. Peer-to-peer oracles are probably one of the most important things in unsolved problems, simply because the potentiality for the decentralized internet is really important to validate real-world events, and that's going to end up being one of those Sybil attack type problems. So it can also resolve issues around new methods of group organization. At a certain point, if you can verify human actions using peer-to-peer oracles, what you can do thereby is, as a consequence, is use English language as a coordination mechanism. Effectively what you can say is, you basically create a generic blockchain that says, okay, we are now doing this as a group, as a collective, and this decentralized coordination mechanism can basically, says we are doing this, and then the value is distributed to everybody, and then the thing just happens because you're rewarded upon fulfilling some type of goal. And then there's peer-to-peer verification on fulfilling those goals. And that's one of those things that can possibly exist in the future. But really today where we're at is sort of experimenting with global distribution, with new distribution technologies, and basically creating gift economies around wide distribution of value. And that's really sort of like a summary of sort of where the current experiments when it comes to the blockchain is really happening.
So, Joseph, I want to ask you some questions.
Yeah.
I hope you guys will bear with me because I really want us to understand what you're saying. And you're really smart, and I want to make sure I have this right.
Yeah, and I didn't do a great job explaining it either.
No, you did a great job of explaining it. But there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
So, let me see. In the current model, to grow a company, you go to a VC,
Yeah.
and they give you some money,
Yeah.
and you use that to build your technology.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you used a gift model, like your Uber, so you put a lot of billions of dollars out there and you grow it. But in the end, all that value goes back to the investors.
Yeah,
So the value goes back to a few.
Yeah, it was especially bad with the whole Oculus dynamic around Kickstarter, where
Okay.
people bought, some people bought T-shirts and like things to support Oculus, and then Facebook bought it, and it's like, oh, well, I just got a
That's
T-shirt,
a bummer.
literally,
That's a bummer. Right. So we have seen that model time and again, right?
Yeah.
That's the capitalist model.
Yeah.
But you're saying that there's pieces of that we could take and use in a blockchain model that is different. It's a different game. You're calling it the abundance game.
Yeah.
And that you really don't need VCs in the growth phase anymore because you can use coin.
There is still value for venture capital, though,
Okay,
when it comes to
right.
development and process and pricing those coins themselves. And I think that's why there is still a process and sort of a game that they play themselves, and it's fairly useful and, pro-social. But it's the problem of, what has always happened time and time again to the open source ecosystem and the internet itself, like in the mid-90s, it was just like, everything started getting privatized. And it was like, why was that? And like, yeah, we can be idealistic and say we're gonna magically create this system that just works in some decentralized way, hand wave. But like, let's look at how we really got there. Let's look at why those things became necessarily centralized and how we can decentralize and actually shift the market away from that. How do we actually grow and get everybody using these decentralized systems?
So you're saying we still need incentives, of course, to scale. You're saying that we can do a gift economy model where we can give tokens, but this time not to eventually the VCs, but we can give it to the people who have been building this thing from the get-go, the open source coders. And you're saying, I'm not going to give you coin because you write for me. I'm going to give it to you on trust. I'm going to give you the value, and maybe you write for me, but maybe you don't.
Yeah, and that's sort of how open source software works, It's sort of like, I give you code, well, you're not really paying me, and I don't expect you to pay me. It'd be nice if you did, but, like, there's my Patreon page, good luck, and that's about it.
Right. So that's not working. But you think that you could use blockchain technologies to replace broken things. Like the DNS, for instance. Why are we paying so much money to this one entity that is very centralized and
certificate authorities.
certificate authorities? Let's just say you had an experiment like Handshake that was going to replace the DNS with a blockchain-based model, so that would get a lot of revenue in the system. But this time, instead of just going to the assholes or tyrants, or maybe
Well, the problem,
nice
when I
people.
said assholes, I'm not actually talking about the people operating it.
Okay.
I'm talking about people trying to like displace them
Okay.
or corrupt them in some way.
Okay.
By and large, you have to be a reasonable person in order to operate a central authority, because otherwise people just won't put up with it.
Okay,
But
so
it's-
you
but
have
it
all
kinda
this
sucks and
value,
is prone
you
to
have all
corruption.
this value, and you're saying that this time you're going to give the value away to open source coders. And I think I heard you say that if it got big enough, you would try and give it away to everyone in the world, the 7 billion people. That you would try and, what did you call it? The universal
Basic asset ownership.
basic asset ownership. And you were saying that you would need all these cryptographic things to do that. That's a really hard
Because
problem.
what's happening in the blockchain space is that, like, one by one, all of these central authorities are being decentralized and basically being put into, the public sphere in a decentralized way. And as that happens over the years, in the future, when everything moves on the blockchain, the notion is that in your self-interest, if you are operating a blockchain project, you will derive more value and success the more you give away.
Right. So, if you're starting a blockchain project, you're going to have tokens, you're going to have value, and you're saying, let's play a game where you have 3 companies. One gives away 50%, one gives away 60%, one gives away 78%. We can all make a decision as consumers, maybe it's self-interest, and we can go with the one that gives more away. We can make that one the winner.
The odds are that, if there's 3, let's presume there's a VPN project 6 months from now, dealing with this notion of, you need some directory and there's some scarcity around that. How do you resolve this problem, when it comes to, when it comes to distribution? Presuming they're all equal, I would postulate that the one that gives away more value to the users and wider society has a greater odds of success.
So suddenly it's not the most competitive, it's not the most best marketed, it's the one that gives its value away to the most people that will succeed.
It's a self-interested competitive game to give away value. That's
Self-interested competitive game to give away value. That is the possible outcome of the blockchain economy.
Yeah.
Okay, so that seems like a lot of theory, seems interesting, but you're actually doing an experiment around this.
Well, I'm helping out with the project.
You're helping out. I think there's a couple other helpers in the audience, and I think you published a website about that this morning called handshake.org. So if you wanted to see your theories put into practice, you could go to handshake.org and see what that's about. But in essence, if I read it right, you raised some capital from VCs, you convinced them that this was worth investing in as an experiment. I think you raised about $10 million. You're giving the first $3 million away to 30 projects that are open source.
It'll probably be a total 10 million.
Right.
All of the value is being given to open source nonprofits.
And you've made a vow that you're going to give the other 7 million away also to open source coders.
And to be clear, that project itself is a fairly decentralized project. Leadership is set up so that there is no participant running it, so to speak. It is a community effort to develop
Community effort, right. But you're not going to keep all the proceeds. You're going to give them all away.
Yeah. The 70% will be going
70%.
to open source developers and nonprofits.
And so the incentive to use your DNS alternative instead of the other certificate authorities is that you're a good guy and you're going to give it all away to 70% is going to give it away. So
this is explicitly self-interest, right? Under that viewpoint of, the odds of success are higher the more are given away.
I see. So that is the abundance game.
Yeah.
And are you hoping that others will adopt it?
Yeah, the hope is that as more and more centralized institutions become decentralized, that they realize that it's in their own self-interest to give away the overwhelming majority to open source developers and nonprofits, and as well as wider humanity in the end.
Well, that's a radical game, Joseph Poon. Congratulations.
Well, it's descriptive of an emergent game that's sort of coming out within the space.
I think you'll want to learn more about that, ask him deep questions. I think another one of the Abundance Game folks is in the audience, Andrew Lee. He's on a panel later this afternoon about funding sustainable open source projects. But thank you for this very fascinating hack at the markets. I just love it. Thank you. Let's hear it for Joseph Poon.
Thank you for hosting. And, this conference has been amazing.
Okay, folks. Okay, Joseph, you got to do something with me. We believe in the gift economy too. So everybody who heard this gets a hat from the Decentralized Web community. Hey, could I have some volunteers to hand out these hats? This is your commemorative hat for the Decentralized Web Summit. Wear it with pride. If you have one already, don't take one, but thank you. Have a good lunch, everyone.